I was on my hands and knees in our garage at 2 in the morning, stringing together 300 tiny LED lights into the shape of a heart, when my husband was 15 miles away, booking a hotel room for Valentine's weekend with his sales rep. I did not know that then, of course. At 2 in the morning on February 11th, I was still the woman who believed in fairy tales. The woman who had spent 6 weeks secretly planning the most elaborate romantic surprise of our 8-year marriage. The woman who thought the distance between us lately was just work stress and nothing that a grand gesture of love could not fix. I was wrong about everything. But being wrong, as it turns out, was the first step toward becoming someone I never knew I could be. My name is Rachel, and I need to tell you this story not because I want sympathy, but because I spent years being the kind of woman who put everyone else first and never questioned whether she deserved the same in return. This is the story of how I discovered that the person I trusted most in this world had been lying to me for months, how I transformed from a woman planning rose petals and champagne into someone capable of dismantling a carefully constructed web of deception, and how I learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is refusing to be anyone's fool. Kevin and I met at a marketing conference in Chicago when I was 23 and he was 26. He was the most magnetic person I had ever encountered. The kind of man who walked into a room and somehow made everyone feel like they were the most important person in it. He remembered names, asked follow-up questions, laughed at jokes that were not even funny just to make people feel good. I watched him work that conference room like a symphony conductor, and when he turned that attention on me, I felt like I had won some cosmic lottery I did not even know I had entered. Our courtship was intense and all-consuming. Kevin pursued me with the same focus he brought to closing deals, and I was completely swept away. Within 6 months, we were living together. Within a year, we were engaged. We got married in a small ceremony in Vermont with autumn leaves falling around us and promises of forever on our lips. I believed every word he said because I had never encountered someone whose words did not match their truth. I did not know yet that some people are simply better performers than others. The first 8 years of our marriage were, as far as I knew, happy ones. We built a life together in Boston, bought a brownstone in Beacon Hill that needed work but had good bones, adopted a rescue dog named Murphy, who Kevin pretended to find annoying but secretly adored. I built my event planning business from nothing into something that was actually starting to thrive. Kevin climbed the corporate ladder at his medical device company, becoming sales director 3 years ago with a team of 12 people under him. We talked about having children someday, traveled to Portugal and Japan and Iceland, hosted dinner parties where we finished each other's sentences, and our friends called us relationship goals. I believed in us completely. I believed in him completely. And maybe that was my first mistake, but I do not think loving someone fully should ever be considered a mistake. The mistake was trusting someone who did not deserve it. The mistake was his to make, not mine. Looking back now, I can see the signs I chose to ignore. The late nights at the office that started becoming more frequent about 8 months before Valentine's Day. The way he would tilt his phone screen away from me when texts came through. The new gym membership he suddenly acquired enthusiasm for, even though Kevin had never voluntarily exercised in the entire time I had known him. The business trips that seemed to require nicer suits and new cologne. I noticed all of these things, cataloged them somewhere in the back of my mind, and then deliberately chose not to examine them too closely. Because examining them would mean questioning everything, and I was not ready to question everything. I was too busy being in love with a man who no longer existed, if he ever had at all. The Valentine's Day surprise I was planning was supposed to be our reset. Kevin had seemed distant lately, preoccupied, and I convinced myself that what we needed was a reminder of why we had chosen each other. I am an event planner by profession, which means I am exceptionally good at creating moments that take people's breath away. I had been working on this surprise for weeks, coordinating with his assistant to clear his calendar, booking a cabin in the Berkshires for the long weekend, arranging for a private chef to prepare his favorite meals, creating a scavenger hunt through our house that would lead him through memories of our relationship. I had love letters hidden at every stop, photographs from our best moments, small gifts that referenced inside jokes only we understood. The LED heart in the garage was going to be the final reveal. I was going to suspend it from the ceiling of the cabin's main room, surrounded by more lights and flowers, and every romantic cliché I had spent my career making fun of for other people's events. For Kevin, I would be the cliché. For Kevin, I would be anything. I finished stringing the lights around 3 in the morning, my fingers raw from the tiny wires and my back aching from hunching over the workbench. Kevin was supposedly at an overnight conference in Providence, which I now know was a lie, but at the time, I just felt grateful for the uninterrupted time to work on my surprise. I stumbled upstairs, collapsed into our empty bed, and fell asleep dreaming about his face when he saw what I had created. The next morning, I woke to Murphy whining at the bedroom door and a text from Kevin saying the conference was running late and he would not be home until that evening. I made myself coffee, took Murphy for a walk through the frost-covered streets, and sat down at my laptop to finalize some details for the weekend. That is when I saw the email. It was from our joint credit card company, an automatic alert I had set up years ago to notify us of charges over $200. I almost deleted it without looking, assuming it was something mundane Kevin had purchased for work. But something made me click. Something made me look. And there it was, in black and white that somehow felt like red. A charge for $487 at the Langham Hotel in Boston, posted that morning, for a reservation that had begun the previous night. My first thought was confusion. Kevin was in Providence. Why would there be a charge at a Boston hotel? My second thought was that there must be some mistake, a fraud alert waiting to happen, something I should call the credit card company about. My third thought, the one that sent ice through my veins and made my hands shake so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup, was that maybe I already knew the answer to my own question. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to construct innocent explanations that my gut was already rejecting. Maybe he had come back early and surprised me, but I was home all night. Maybe he had booked it for a colleague, but why would a charge for last night post this morning if he was not there? Maybe. The maybes were a life raft I was clinging to, while the ship of my marriage burned around me. Finally, I did something I had never done in 8 years. I logged into our phone account and looked at Kevin's call and text records. What I found made me wish I had never looked at all. Pages of texts and calls to a number I did not recognize, sometimes a dozen times a day, often late at night when he had told me he was working or traveling or at the gym. The pattern was unmistakable. The frequency was overwhelming. Whatever was happening with that number was not casual or professional. It was constant, consuming, and it had been going on for months. I wrote down the number with hands that would not stop trembling. Then I did something that surprised even me. I picked up my phone and called it. It rang 3 times before a woman answered, her voice bright and cheerful, clearly expecting someone else on the line. When I said nothing, she said, "Hello again," a hint of confusion creeping in. Then she asked if this was Kevin, and my world finished its slow-motion collapse into rubble. I hung up without speaking. I sat in my kitchen with my cold coffee and my rescue dog looking at me with concerned brown eyes, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I had just discovered. My husband was having an affair. the man I had spent 8 years building a life with, the man I was planning an elaborate Valentine's surprise for, the man I had trusted with my whole heart, had been lying to me for months. And I had been so busy being devoted that I had refused to see what was right in front of my face. For about an hour, I cried. I let myself feel the grief and the rage and the humiliation, let the tears flow until my face was swollen and my throat was raw. Murphy climbed onto the couch beside me and pressed his warm body against my legs, offering the only comfort available in that moment. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the future I thought was waiting, for the woman I had been that morning who still believed in fairy tales. Then I dried my eyes, washed my face, and started making a plan. The first person I called was Lisa, my business partner and the closest thing I had to a best friend. Lisa had never particularly liked Kevin, though she had always been polite about it. She said once, after too much wine at a company holiday party, that she thought he was too charming, that real people had rough edges, but Kevin was polished smooth all the way through. I had dismissed it as her natural skepticism about men, a skepticism earned through her own difficult divorce 5 years earlier. Now I wondered if Lisa had seen something I had been too close to notice. Lisa listened without interrupting while I told her what I had found. When I finished, there was a long pause, and then she said something I will never forget. She said that she was sorry this was happening, that she knew how much I loved him, but that this was also an opportunity. She asked me if I wanted to confront him and scream and give him a chance to explain, or if I wanted to know exactly who I was dealing with before I made any decisions. I thought about it for exactly 5 seconds before I knew my answer. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to understand the full scope of what had been happening behind my back before I revealed that I knew anything at all. I wanted to gather evidence, not accusations. I wanted facts, not excuses. I wanted to be prepared. Lisa came over that afternoon with her laptop and a bottle of wine I did not drink because I needed my mind sharp. She had been through a divorce herself and knew things I did not about how to protect yourself when you discovered your partner's betrayal. She helped me make a list of everything I needed to document: financial records, phone records, the hotel charge, any emails or texts I could access. She reminded me that in Massachusetts, adultery could affect divorce proceedings, including alimony and property division. She told me to take screenshots of everything, to save files in a secure cloud account Kevin did not know about, to trust no one until I knew the full picture. Over the next 3 days, I became someone I barely recognized. By day, I maintained perfect normalcy, texting Kevin with loving messages, asking about his conference, expressing excitement about Valentine's Day. By night, I dug through every corner of our shared digital life, uncovering a trail of deception that stretched back much further than I had initially realized. The affair had been going on for at least 6 months, probably longer. Her name was Amber Sinclair, and she was one of Kevin's sales representatives, a 28-year-old woman who had joined his team 18 months earlier. I found her on LinkedIn and social media, a conventionally attractive blonde with an MBA from a mid-tier business school and a carefully curated Instagram full of luxury vacations and designer handbags. She looked like exactly what she was, someone ambitious enough to pursue a married man who could advance her career. The evidence I uncovered was damning and extensive. Credit card charges at hotels on nights Kevin claimed to be at conferences or working late. Restaurant receipts from romantic establishments he had never taken me to. Receipts for jewelry and gifts that I had never received. A second phone line on our family account that I had somehow never noticed, the number matching the one I had called that morning. And email after email, hidden in a folder he probably thought I would never find. detailing months of lies and plans and promises. Reading those emails was its own form of torture. Kevin wrote to Amber with a passion and attention I had not felt directed at me in years. He called her his soulmate, said he had never felt this way about anyone, promised that he was going to leave me soon so they could be together properly. He complained about me, about my focus on my business, about how I did not understand him the way Amber did, about how our marriage had become a cage he needed to escape. He made me sound like a burden, an obstacle, a mistake he was working to correct. But the detail that cut deepest was buried in an email from 2 weeks earlier. Kevin had written to Amber about Valentine's Day, about how excited he was to spend the holiday weekend with her at a boutique hotel in Newport, while I thought he was at another conference. He wrote about the room he had booked, the restaurant reservations he had made, the lingerie he had bought her as a gift. He was planning his own Valentine surprise, just not for his wife. I sat with that knowledge for a long moment, the irony so bitter I could taste it. I had been on my hands and knees in our garage, stringing lights for a man who was simultaneously booking romantic weekends with his mistress. I had been writing love letters while he was writing emails to another woman. I had been believing in our future while he was dismantling it behind my back. The old Rachel would have confronted him immediately, demanded answers, given him a chance to explain. But the old Rachel was gone, replaced by someone harder and clearer and far more dangerous. This new Rachel was going to play a longer game. I called Lisa and told her everything I had found. Together, we started building a strategy. I needed to protect my business, which Kevin had no legal claim to but might try to entangle in divorce proceedings. I needed to document the financial infidelity, the money he had spent on Amber that should have been joint marital assets. I needed to consult with a divorce attorney, quietly, before revealing anything to Kevin. And I needed to decide what I wanted the outcome to be: simple separation or something more. Lisa asked me what would feel like justice. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. Simple justice would be divorce, taking half of everything, moving on with my life. But Kevin had not just cheated on me, he had made a fool of me, had complained about me to his mistress, had let me plan elaborate romantic surprises while he was booking hotel rooms with another woman. He had treated me like a supporting character in my own life story, a boring wife to be managed and eventually discarded. Simple justice was not enough. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have your world collapse. I wanted consequences that matched his crimes. I wanted him to know that I was not someone who could be betrayed without response. The divorce attorney I consulted with was a woman named Dorothy Kessler, a silver-haired former prosecutor with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in family court. Lisa had used her for her own divorce and swore she was worth every penny of her considerable fees. Dorothy listened to my story with the unflappable calm of someone who had heard every variation of marital betrayal imaginable, asked precise questions about finances and assets and documentation, and then told me something that changed my entire approach. She told me that Massachusetts was a no-fault divorce state, which meant adultery alone would not give me an advantage in court. But what mattered was documentation of marital waste, the spending of joint assets on an affair. She said if I could prove Kevin had spent significant money on Amber, money that should have been building our joint future, I could argue for a larger share of our assets as compensation. She also mentioned that if the affair had involved any manipulation of company resources, Kevin's employer might be very interested in knowing about it. Affairs between supervisors and subordinates could be problematic from an HR perspective, especially if there was any hint of favoritism or inappropriate use of company funds. That last piece of information opened a door I had not considered. Kevin was not just having an affair. He was having an affair with someone he supervised, someone whose career advancement depended on his approval. There were business trips they had taken together, bonuses she had received, a promotion she had earned 6 months into their relationship. I had no way of knowing if any of that was legitimate or if Kevin had been using his position to benefit his mistress, but it was certainly worth exploring. Over the next week, I continued my double life. To Kevin, I was the devoted wife, sending loving texts, finalizing Valentine's plans, expressing excitement about our upcoming romantic weekend. To myself, I was building a case, documenting everything, preparing for the confrontation that was now inevitable. I felt like an actress in a play, performing a role I no longer believed in while the real drama waited in the wings. The hardest part was the nights. Kevin came home from work and kissed me hello, asked about my day, told me stories about his team and his deals and his plans. He was good at this, I realized. He had probably been good at this for months, maybe years, switching seamlessly between husband and lover without missing a beat. I wondered if he felt any guilt at all, if there were moments when the weight of his lies pressed on his conscience, or if he had simply compartmentalized so thoroughly that he did not even think about it anymore. I watched him for signs of conflict, for cracks in the facade, but he was flawless. The same charm that had drawn me to him at that conference a decade ago was now the armor protecting his secret life. He was a performer, and I had been his most devoted audience. But audiences eventually see through the act, and performers eventually face the reviews. His was coming. Valentine's Day arrived with the grotesque irony of a winter storm that delayed both of our carefully planned romantic getaways. I was secretly relieved. The idea of playing devoted wife at the cabin in the Berkshires had become almost unbearable. Kevin, meanwhile, seemed agitated about the weather, and I now understood why. His weekend with Amber was in jeopardy, and he could not exactly complain about it to his wife. Instead of our respective romantic escapes, we spent Valentine's Day snowed in together. Kevin gave me flowers and chocolate, and a piece of jewelry I knew he had panic purchased at the last minute because the original gift had been intended for someone else. I gave him the scavenger hunt I had planned, watching him walk through memories of our relationship with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes, reading my love letters with expressions of appropriate emotion that I now saw as practiced rather than genuine. At the final station of my scavenger hunt, the one that was supposed to lead to the LED heart in the garage, I had made a change. Instead of the romantic message I had originally planned, I had left a simple note that said I had one more surprise coming, but it was not quite ready yet. Kevin seemed relieved, probably eager to reschedule his Newport weekend once the weather cleared. He thanked me for a beautiful Valentine's Day, told me he did not deserve me, and went to bed early claiming exhaustion. He was right that he did not deserve me. He just did not understand yet what that meant. The following weeks were a careful dance of preparation. I met with Dorothy Kessler twice more, finalizing my documentation and discussing strategy. I opened my own bank account and started quietly moving money from our joint savings, just enough to establish financial independence without raising red flags. I made copies of every important document in our house and stored them with Lisa. I researched Kevin's company policies on workplace relationships and discovered that supervisors were prohibited from having romantic relationships with direct reports without disclosure to HR, and that failure to disclose could result in termination. That last piece of information became central to my plan. Kevin's job was his identity, his source of confidence and status and income. He was on track for a VP position that would cement his career and dramatically increase his earnings. If that job disappeared, so would the future he was building with Amber. He might still leave me, but he would not be leaving for the upgrade he had imagined. Through Lisa's network, I found a way to verify what I suspected about Kevin's abuse of his position. A former colleague at his company, someone who had left under difficult circumstances, was willing to talk to me confidentially. What she told me confirmed my worst suspicions and revealed new depths of Kevin's betrayal. Amber's rise through the company had been unusually rapid, aided by glowing performance reviews from Kevin and high-profile assignments that should have gone to more senior salespeople. There had been whispers about favoritism, but no one had connected it to an affair because Kevin was so careful about maintaining his family man image at work. He brought me to company events, talked about our vacation plans, kept photos of us on his desk. The perfect cover for the perfect betrayal. The former colleague also mentioned something else. She suspected Kevin had been expensing some of his and Amber's activities as business costs, disguising romantic dinners as client entertainment and hotel rooms as conference travel. If that was true, it was not just an HR violation, it was fraud. I spent 3 days gathering every piece of evidence I could find of potential expense report manipulation. The trail was clearer than I expected. Hotel stays that did not correspond to any conferences, restaurant charges in cities where no clients existed, receipts for gifts categorized as client appreciation items. Either Kevin was sloppy or he was so confident he would never be caught that he did not bother covering his tracks. Either way, the documentation was damning. Dorothy reviewed everything and confirmed that I had grounds for both a highly advantageous divorce and a potential fraud referral to his company. She asked me again what outcome I wanted, and I finally had a clear answer. I wanted Kevin to face consequences that matched his betrayal. I wanted his affair exposed not just to me, but to everyone who had believed his family man act. I wanted his career to reflect his actual character. I wanted Amber to understand that sleeping with someone else's husband came with costs. And I wanted to walk away from this marriage with my dignity, my business, and the knowledge that I had refused to be a victim. The plan we developed was multi-stage and carefully timed. First, I would confront Kevin privately, give him a chance to see exactly how much I knew, and watch him squirm. Second, I would file for divorce, with documentation that would ensure a favorable settlement. Third, I would anonymously submit the expense fraud evidence to his company's ethics hotline, letting the consequences unfold naturally. Fourth, I would reach out to Amber's fiancé, because yes, Amber was engaged to someone else, a detail I had discovered buried in her social media that added another layer of ugliness to the whole situation. The confrontation happened on a Thursday evening in early March. Kevin came home from work to find me sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of me. He asked what was going on, his voice already tightening with the instinctive awareness that something was wrong. I told him to sit down because we needed to talk. I will never forget the look on his face as I laid out everything I knew. The hotel charges, the phone records, the emails, the expense report fraud, the employment policy violations, the months of lies and manipulation and betrayal. I watched him cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, and finally a kind of desperate scrambling that was almost satisfying to witness. He tried every tactic, claiming I had misunderstood, blaming work stress, suggesting that we could work through this, accusing me of invading his privacy, threatening consequences if I told anyone. But I was not the woman he had married anymore. I was not the woman who would accept excuses or believe lies or prioritize his comfort over my own well-being. I told him calmly that our marriage was over, that I had already filed for divorce, and that he had 24 hours to move out of our house before I began the next phase of making sure everyone knew exactly who he was. He asked what I meant by the next phase, and I just smiled. He did not deserve advance warning about the consequences. He deserved to feel exactly what I had felt, blindsided, betrayed, and utterly powerless to stop what was coming. Kevin moved out that night, taking a suitcase of clothes and leaving behind most of his possessions. He went to Amber's apartment, I later learned, probably expecting her to comfort him through the crisis. He did not know yet that her engagement was about to unravel too, that her fiancé would receive an anonymous message with evidence of her affair within the week, that she was about to lose the respectable future she had been so carefully constructing. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Dorothy had prepared everything so thoroughly that Kevin's attorney had little room to negotiate. The evidence of marital waste, the money Kevin had spent on Amber using joint assets, resulted in me receiving 65% of our shared property instead of the standard 50%. He had to pay my legal fees as well, a consequence of his documented financial infidelity. The brownstone was mine. The savings were mostly mine. The future was entirely mine. The company investigation took longer, but was even more satisfying. The ethics hotline report triggered a comprehensive review of Kevin's expense accounts, which revealed even more fraud than I had initially documented. He was terminated for cause 3 weeks after our divorce was finalized, losing not just his job, but his deferred compensation, his stock options, and his professional reputation. The VP position he had been chasing evaporated. His references were tainted. His career, the identity he had valued above his marriage, was in ruins. Amber did not escape consequences either. Though she was not directly implicated in the expense fraud, the investigation revealed the inappropriate relationship with her supervisor, which violated company policy. She was given the choice to resign or be terminated, and she chose to resign rather than have a termination on her record. Her fiancé, meanwhile, had ended their engagement the week before after receiving my anonymous message. He thanked me in a brief email, one stranger to another, for having the courage to tell him the truth. The aftermath was surprisingly peaceful. I had expected to feel more anger, more grief, more of the churning emotions that had consumed me in those first days after discovering the affair. But mostly, I felt free. I felt like I had been carrying a weight I did not know I was carrying, and now it was gone. The brownstone was quiet without Kevin, but it was my quiet. Murphy seemed happier too, no longer having to compete for attention with someone who only pretended to care. Lisa threw me a divorce party a month after the papers were finalized. She invited all our mutual friends, the ones who had watched me and Kevin for years and thought we were relationship goals. I told them the truth about what had happened, not to humiliate Kevin, but because I was done pretending. I was done protecting someone who had never protected me. They were shocked, but supportive, and more than one admitted they had noticed small things over the years that they had dismissed as nothing. People see more than we think they do. They just often do not want to get involved. I heard updates about Kevin occasionally through the friend network, the way you hear about distant natural disasters that no longer affect you. He moved back to the Midwest to stay with his parents while he figured out his next steps. He and Amber broke up within weeks of losing their jobs, their relationship apparently unable to survive the absence of his money and status. He tried to start over in sales at a smaller company, but struggled to explain the gap in his resume. The charm that had always opened doors for him was working less effectively now that there was no position or power behind it. I did not feel sorry for him. I should probably pretend that I did, that I was the bigger person who wished him well despite everything, but that would be a lie. I was glad he was suffering. I was glad his carefully constructed life had collapsed. I was glad the consequences of his choices had finally caught up with him. Maybe that makes me petty, or maybe it just makes me human. The following Valentine's Day, 1 year after I had discovered the truth, I did something I had never done before. I took myself on a date. I got dressed up, went to a fancy restaurant alone, ordered champagne and the tasting menu and dessert. I sat at a table for one and felt absolutely at peace with my own company. The woman at the next table asked if I was waiting for someone, and I smiled and told her no, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I was. I had spent so many years making myself smaller to fit into someone else's life, planning surprises for someone who did not appreciate them, giving my heart to someone who did not protect it. Now I was planning surprises for myself. Now I was protecting my own heart. Now I was building a future that did not depend on anyone else's approval or affection. This story does not have a neat ending, because life does not have neat endings. I am still healing from the betrayal, still learning to trust my own judgment again, still figuring out who I am when I am not half of a couple. Some days are harder than others. Some nights I still wake up angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for being so devoted that I was blind. But mostly, I am proud. Proud of myself for surviving. Proud for refusing to be a victim. Proud for making sure that what happened to me came with consequences. If you are watching this and recognizing something in my story, if you are seeing parallels in your own life that you have been trying not to see, I want to tell you something important. Your instincts are probably right. The things you are explaining away, the excuses you are making, the dots you are refusing to connect, they probably add up to exactly what you fear they do. And you deserve better. You deserve someone who is not performing love while secretly building an escape route. You deserve honesty and respect and a partner who values your devotion instead of exploiting it. The Valentine surprise I was preparing became something entirely different than I had planned. Instead of a romantic gesture that would have been wasted on someone who did not deserve it, it became the foundation of my awakening. Finding that hotel charge led me to the truth, and the truth led me to freedom. And freedom led me to a life that is actually mine. Kevin is still out there somewhere, probably charming some new woman who has not yet learned to see through his act. Amber is still out there too, presumably finding new opportunities to advance through other people's marriages. They are who they are. People like them do not change. They just find new victims. But I am not a victim anymore. I am a survivor. I am a woman who planned one of the most elaborate romantic surprises of her marriage while her husband was simultaneously booking romantic weekends with his mistress, who discovered the truth through a simple credit card alert, who channeled her heartbreak into strategic action, and who emerged on the other side, stronger and wiser and completely free. The LED heart I built is still in my garage, never used for its original purpose. Sometimes I think about throwing it away, but mostly I leave it there as a reminder of who I used to be and who I became. It represents a version of love I used to believe in, a naive devotion that left me vulnerable to betrayal. And it represents a turning point, the moment when my hands got raw and my back got sore, and I was willing to do anything for someone who was doing nothing for me. I do not string lights for other people anymore. At least, not for people who have not proven they deserve it. I am more careful now with my devotion, more strategic with my trust, more protective of the heart I used to give away so freely. I am still an event planner by profession, still someone who creates beautiful moments for other people. But I have learned that the most important events are the ones we create for ourselves. The moments of recognition, of strength, of choosing ourselves when others would have us choose them. When you're preparing a Valentine's surprise and they are preparing to cheat, the natural response is heartbreak. But there is another response possible, one that transforms the betrayal into something meaningful. You can take all that energy you were pouring into someone else and redirect it toward yourself. You can gather evidence instead of tears. You can plan consequences instead of romantic dinners. You can become someone who refuses to be betrayed without response. That is what I did. That is my story. And if you are in a situation like mine, wondering whether to confront or to wait, wondering whether to trust or to investigate, wondering whether you are being paranoid or perceptive, I hope my story gives you permission to trust yourself. Your instincts are probably right. The truth is probably exactly what you fear. And you are probably stronger than you think you are. I know I was.